A poor little girl offers her sandwich to a man who seems homeless, without knowing he is a millionaire in disguise. Days later, he arrives in a Rolls Royce, and that single act of kindness changes her life forever. Luciana noticed a man sitting alone on a park bench. His clothes were torn and dirty, yet something about him stood out from the rest of the homeless people she had seen. Maybe it was the piercing blue of his eyes against his sunburnt skin and scruffy beard. Or maybe it was a quiet dignity he carried, even in his worn-out shirt. Without a second thought, the 12-year-old walked up to him and held out half of her sandwich. "You look hungry," she said softly. The man looked startled, as if he wasn't used to anyone noticing him. "This is your lunch, isn't it?" he asked in a calm, deep voice. "It's just half," Luciana replied quickly. Her stomach growled, but she lied anyway. "I'm not that hungry." It was, in truth, the only food she had for the day. Ever since her grandmother became sick, meals had grown scarcer. The man hesitated, then accepted the sandwich. "Why would you share with a stranger?" he asked curiously. Luciana shrugged. "My grandma says sharing matters more when you have very little." She noticed something odd. His hands, though dirty, looked well kept. Strange for someone who lived on the streets. "What's your name?" he asked, studying her closely. "Luciana. Luciana Ribeiro. I live over there." She pointed to crumbling apartments across the square. He took a slow bite, savoring it. "This is the best sandwich I've ever had." Luciana smiled shyly. "It's only peanut butter. That's all we had left this week." Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance. The man tensed and stood. "I have to go," he said, slipping the rest of the sandwich into his pocket. "Thank you, Luciana Ribeiro." 3 days later, as Luciana returned from school, she froze in shock. A shining silver Rolls Royce sat parked outside her rundown building, so out of place it looked like a fairy tale. A well-dressed man in a suit stood beside it, speaking with curious neighbors. When he saw her, he smiled warmly and walked over. "Are you Luciana Ribeiro?" he asked formally. Luciana nodded, confused. She had never seen him before. "My name is Marcus Silva. I am the lawyer for Mr. Eduardo Vascanos, CEO of Vascanos Enterprises." The name meant nothing to her. "My client would like to meet you and your guardian. Are your parents at home?" Luciana's throat tightened. "I don't have parents. I live with my grandmother, but she's in the hospital." Marcus blinked, taken aback. "I see. Is there another adult responsible for you right now?" "Mrs. Denise from 3B checks on me while Grandma's in the hospital," she answered. As they climbed the shaky stairs, Luciana's mind swirled. Why would a wealthy man want anything to do with her? Was it a mistake? A cruel joke? "Why does this Eduardo want to see me?" she finally asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "He said you gave him something very valuable." Luciana frowned in disbelief. "Impossible. I don't know any Eduardo." At Mrs. Denise's apartment, Marcus made a phone call and handed Luciana the phone. "Hello, Luciana," came a familiar voice. "I believe you gave me half of your peanut butter sandwich 3 days ago." Her eyes widened. That voice, those same piercing blue eyes in her memory, the homeless man from the park. But now, he was revealed as a millionaire. No one in her poor neighborhood could have imagined that one simple act of kindness would spark a journey that changed everything. A story where the generosity of a forgotten child would prove stronger than wealth, teaching a lesson about compassion that many adults had long lost. Luciana had been hiding in the library during recess when Miss Helena found her, sitting beside the girl. She said gently, "You know, when I was your age, I didn't fit in either, but I discovered that books can be the best companions." From then on, Helena became more than just a teacher. She became Luciana's mentor. Seeing the girl's extraordinary potential, she began lending her advanced books and encouraging her to write. "Your voice is unique," Helena told her, "and voices like yours deserve to be heard." Meanwhile, Eduardo Vasconos was facing trouble within his own family. His eldest son, Ricardo, who was supposed to inherit the empire, was furious about his father's growing interest in Luciana, the girl from the slums, as he sneered. "Father has always had a weakness for hopeless causes," Ricardo muttered to his mother. Daniela, Eduardo's ex-wife. First that ridiculous project in the Amazon, now this girl, and we're the ones who will suffer the consequences. What Ricardo didn't know was that Luciana was already making her own plans. In the months that followed, while acting like nothing more than a quiet, grateful child, she watched everything carefully. She listened when the family thought she wasn't paying attention. She noted the power struggles, the contradictions in Ricardo's stories, and the hidden tensions within the Vasconos household. With quiet support from Professor Helena, Luciana not only excelled in her schoolwork, but also studied the empire itself, its businesses, its money flow, and its secrets. She understood her place was fragile. If Ricardo or Daniela convinced Eduardo she wasn't worth the effort, everything could vanish overnight. Knowledge is power. Helena often reminded her, never realizing how deeply Luciana was taking that lesson to heart. One rainy afternoon, waiting in the library for a ride, Luciana overheard Ricardo speaking with a stranger in the next room. Their voices were hushed, but she caught words like embezzlement, offshore accounts, and my father will never know. Something shifted in her eyes that day. Ricardo might see her as just a charity case, but he was underestimating who Luciana Ribeiro really was. She was the girl who had survived hunger while her grandmother was in the hospital, the girl who had endured the harshest streets. And now, she had something she had never had before, resources. Some people think kindness is weakness, she whispered to herself as she quietly slipped away. But what happens when someone kind decides not to stay a background character in the story of people like Ricardo Vasconos? A year passed since that overheard conversation. At just 13, Luciana's transformation was striking. She wasn't only excelling in school, but had also developed skills far beyond her years. Through online courses secretly supported by Helena, she became fluent in accounting and finance. I don't understand why a girl your age is so fascinated with financial statements, Helena remarked one day, reviewing Luciana's brilliant report on corporate fraud. But your gift for numbers is undeniable. Luciana only smiled. Let's just say it's a skill worth having in the real world. Her grandmother, now healthy and living comfortably in the home Eduardo had provided, began noticing changes. You always seem to be observing, planning something, she remarked one evening. I'm just learning, Grandma, Luciana replied, hugging her, learning a lot. But in truth, Luciana was building a vast map of Ricardo's corruption. Using the mansion's Wi-Fi during her visits, she recorded every inconsistency, every suspicious transfer, and every whispered conversation. All of it was safely stored in an encrypted cloud, waiting for the right moment. That moment came during Eduardo's 60th birthday, a grand celebration at the mansion. Dressed elegantly in clothes chosen by Helena, Luciana watched Ricardo swagger confidently among powerful politicians and businessmen, as if the world belonged to him. Ricardo stopped beside her, smirking. His champagne glass wasn't his first of the night. Impressive how comfortable you look here, he said mockingly, almost as if you belong in this world. Maybe I belong here more than you think, Luciana replied evenly. Ricardo laughed bitterly. Look around you. These people, judges, politicians, businessmen, they built this country. No matter how much my father invests in you, you'll always be the sandwich girl. Luciana's eyes narrowed. Interesting that you mention investments. Ricardo, you've made quite a few yourself, haven't you? Especially in the Cayman Islands. The champagne glass shook in his hand. What are you talking about? Project Cascada, she said softly. That's the scheme you created to funnel money out of your father's company, isn't it? I have the emails, the transfers, even recordings. And all while you were bribing politicians to block your father's health projects. Ricardo's face drained of color. You're bluffing. A 13-year-old couldn't. A 13-year-old you underestimated, Luciana interrupted firmly. The same girl you dismissed as nothing, while she was quietly learning every detail of your crimes. At that moment, Eduardo walked over, his polite smile hiding curiosity at their tense exchange. Is everything all right here? Perfectly, Luciana said calmly. In fact, I was about to suggest that Ricardo, you and I have a private talk in your office. There's something important I need to show you. Inside Eduardo's study, Luciana connected her tablet to the projector. Ricardo stood stiff, while Eduardo sat, bewildered. "What is this, Luciana?" he asked. "The truth," she answered simply. For the next hour, Luciana revealed everything. Ricardo's fake investments, offshore accounts, bribes, and even his plans to force Eduardo out of the company. Document after document, recording after recording, appeared on the screen in perfect order. "This is impossible," Eduardo whispered, his face twisted with disbelief as the evidence piled up. "Shut up," Ricardo shouted suddenly, losing control. He lunged at Luciana, but Eduardo restrained him. "You're nothing," Ricardo spat, trembling with rage. "Just a girl from the slums, a liar who tricked my father." Luciana's voice stayed calm. "The difference between us, Ricardo, is that I never had to lie. Every piece of evidence here is real. Every recording, including the one I just made of your unwilling confession, is genuine." Eduardo, shaken to his core, dropped heavily into his chair. "Why, Ricardo? Why all of this?" "Because you're throwing it all away," Ricardo burst out. "Decades spent building an empire. For what? To waste it on charities, on street kids, on projects that bring no profit? Someone had to save this company from you." The room fell into a deadly silence. Eduardo, looking as though 10 years had passed in just 10 minutes, stared at his son as if he no longer knew him. "I never realized how far apart we are," Eduardo said at last. "I built this empire, as you call it, not for greed, but to make the difference I could never make when I was poor. And you become exactly the kind of man I fought against my whole life." Turning to Luciana, his voice softened. "Why didn't you come to me the moment you discovered this?" "I needed proof no one could deny," she answered. Then, after a pause, she glanced at Ricardo. "And because I know what it means to lose family. I didn't want to be the one to take your son away without being absolutely certain." Tears rolled down Eduardo's face. With a trembling but firm voice, he looked at Ricardo. "Tomorrow, you will step down from every role in the Vascono companies. Your shares will be frozen until we investigate the full extent of the damage. If crimes are involved, and it seems they are, you will face the law." "You can't do this," Ricardo protested. "I'm your only heir." "No," Eduardo replied firmly. "An heir isn't just born into a family. An heir is someone who protects its values. You had every privilege, every chance, and you chose to use them to destroy instead of build." Ricardo stormed out, leaving Eduardo seated, staring blankly at the wall. Luciana remained quiet. "How?" Eduardo finally asked. "How did you uncover all this?" "The same way I survived on the streets," she answered simply. "By watching, listening, never underestimating people, learning the systems and finding a way through." Eduardo studied her closely. She was no longer just a desperate girl in need, but a young woman of strength and integrity, rarer qualities than he often saw in powerful men. "When I first met you, I thought I was helping you," he admitted softly. "I never imagined one day you would be the one saving me." That night, while the party went on downstairs, 2 people stayed in the office, reshaping the future. A billionaire forced to rethink his legacy, and a girl whose remarkable journey was only just beginning. Later, alone in her room, Luciana gazed out at the glittering city lights. Not long ago, she had been a starving girl sharing half a sandwich with a stranger. Now, she had changed the course of one of the nation's greatest fortunes. The question on everyone's mind was no longer what would become of the slum girl Eduardo Vasconos had taken in, but what would become the Vascono empire under someone who understood not just the power of money, but the value of a single act of kindness.